Like everyone, I need ways to compose myself, to de-escalate, to re-energize, regain perspective on what really matters, and reconnect with who I really am. I want to share with you this morning the healing process of self-therapy that I have found by gathering myself in music. If time allows, I want to illustrate some of that by sharing some very personal experiences I've had just in the last few days, and especially yesterday with a real therapist. My title has several meanings, as there are several dimensions to this gathering myself in music. At the most literal level, I surround myself with music. I gather music around me, bask in it. Music almost always fills the airs of my life, but sometimes I enter into a special relationship with that musical host in my home. I gather my music around me as you might arrange flowers. I draw on a whole bunch of cuts. I pick out a few that seem to bloom with special fineness right now, and arrange them to gather those individual pieces to a concert, a satisfying aesthetic wholeness, delightful enough to share or display. I've always loved music, but my music craft, I think, began as an undergraduate, when I spent more time at the radio station than I did in class. I'm sure you can relate to that as an ex-DJ. I found the process of mixing music and sharing that instantaneously so intoxicating I couldn't get enough of it. That was back in the days of freeform radio, so no dictating format or intrusive commercials broke the oft-inspired flow that my music might find. The flow. That was the raison d'etre, and I mispronounced that, I'm sure, but that was the whole point of that radio show, the set and how that would flow, the aesthetics that I still bring to my life in my intellect as well as my other creative works. So as it must be for each in her way, I'm sure, graduation was for me an expulsion as well. No more radio show. As a kind of compensation, I began making mixtapes of music that moved me and especially elevated my spirit, and that I felt I needed to share, first with my sister and then with other friends, though in that medium I remained for a long time wistful for the inability to pull off a crossfade. As time diminished the void that radio had left, I cultivated that craft to revise and reshape that music and to wrest Marxist manifestos from the rudimentary art form of the 60, 90-minute mixtape. I think any form of creative expression is therapeutic activity, but I began to discover in my lowbrow artistry a self-therapy in the classic sense of the Gestalt. I was using the supposedly external medium of songs by other people to find there and to work there with my supposedly inner moods or issues and to work those out. But what I was working on in myself and with in the music of others, I think is better described not as an issue or as something that's an experience itself, but as motif. I think what I was doing is finding in that motif that I would gather through that music something that spoke both from me and to me as an experience that wasn't mine alone. The impetus usually came, and still comes, as I need to use the present tense, when a song works its ethereal hooks into the softer skin of my experience. Insistent or haunting, resonant in thrill or beauty or ache even. What get me are those hooks that I can't remove, that belong to me now, that sting or seduce me with their pointed reminders that something in my life wants to find its voice like that. By the end of the mixing, I will realize what it was. Sometimes I don't, but usually I'll realize what it was about that song that brought a new association, a new overtone, a new dimension to the mix, a feeling I may only have been partly aware of before, now conscious, expressed, audible, its voice finally found in the ears that that music has made me grow. And that's how Gestalt works therapeutically. And this in a more permanent medium now. I will share that. I'll come back to that mixed CD. How could I not? And I will go back there myself many times over. And each time as a new self with new ears. Yes, I am a confessed music junkie. I'm sure I could satisfy multiple DSM criteria for my substance of choice, but I think less ecstatic listeners also feel the connection between music and our experience. We hear a song from our past, whether it's My Girl, or Lily Marlene, or Smells Like Teen Spirit, or some cherished Schumann leader. And in that present experience, a flood of memories from earlier times may rise up. We may even have soundtracks from longer stretches of our lives, as in that summer everybody kept on playing Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, or the goth or grunge or gangsta period, music from childhood, from first love, senior year, or any of the points more impressed on our life. Many theorists of music have thought that it's the purest of arts for expressing emotion, as music can evoke so vividly, which is not to say cause, but evoke, frustration, determination, joy, sadness, longing, almost any feeling we can put a word to, and some to which words simply aren't equal. Music may play to my thought as well, not just through programmatic music, not just through the lyrics, but also through the various associations I may have to what I'm hearing, and not just hearing the association, as in cherish. Music plays to our bodies in rhythms that move those tiny little membranes in our ears, or drum our larger muscles to the point of dancing. The strummed guitar, the subtle percussive forte of piano strings. All of these instruments attack or caress our acoustic atmosphere as their manifold vibrations engage organically the electric energy of our sometimes nervous lives. Music moves the spirit. As sound, it breathes in us the ancient Greek pneuma, which is the root of our word pneumatic, where spirit and breath and air are all of one body. The breath of spirit that fills us in Gregorian or Buddhist chant, but just as much in the Beach Boys' In My Room, or Roberta Flack's The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face, or anything played by a great saxophonist. Sidney Bechet's always got this spirit. John Coltrane. It may be that even the best attempts to analyze music's aesthetic effect are doomed to fail. Because when we break it down, as if the sounded chord could be reduced to the sum of its constituents. So one of the last century's more suggestive theories of music and other art generally, attempted instead of breaking the experience apart, to find what holds it so beautifully together. The great American philosopher John Dewey argued that music can only be understood in connection with experience, since all art is derived from experience. And in one sense, this is obvious. Certainly the colors of painting, the rock and clay of sculpture, the tones and timbres of music have to be found in our experience before they can be shaped into art. But in our everyday experience, those sensory elements are not yet art. They're just the dumb and muddled rudiments of our experience. The stuff of art is life, but life itself only becomes art when the musician or painter or writer captures something essential of life and shows that in a purer expressive form. Dewey contrasted the general and more ordinary sense of experience as that fills our waking hours continuously with its successive contents, and our dreams as well. He contrasted that ordinary sense of experience with an experience, a singular use of the term we often pronounce with an exclamation point. That dinner last May on the Seine was an experience. That ski trip when we were snowed in 3 days and enjoyed all that beer that guy sent over from that Washington prep school, that was an experience. Even that little errand turned out to be some experience. So there can be this complicating sense of that singularity as well. These are the incidents that stand out against the backgrounds of our more mundane daily lives and take on their own qualities of distinction. An experience is one in which all the different elements that make it up are gathered, dewy things, into a single quality that pervades them all. Dewey saw this distinctive character of an experience as the key to understanding the work of music or art, both as a work and our experience of it. In that, for the work of artistic creation to be effective, it has to rest from the resources and resistance of the medium, whether that is stone or clay or color or sound. It has to rest from the resources of the medium. The less formed fields of experience, out of that has to find a unifying, pervasive quality that ordinary experience lacks in its brute form, until it rings with the rightness of performed essence. I believe it was Rodin who said that in sculpture, what you do is you take away everything that doesn't belong. You cut away everything that doesn't belong, and that's what the sculptor does. Was that Rodin? It was one great sculptor or another. I believe, maybe not like Rodin, but I believe that this process is exactly what I'm engaged in when I'm bringing forth in my musical gathering the work of my gathering self. What I do with music isn't cooked up from the raw scratch of experience in the way that Wynton Marsalis or Beyonce can do, but I'm playing artist to the raw material of my life. Through that creative work, I consciously craft my way toward an elusive essence. I consciously work through that alchemical process, filtering out the dross so that what is golden in my life might shimmer with a completeness, a wholeness, a sense of rightness, like the butterfly on the plant. Just so. Wouldn't it be great to have a life like that work of art? That's something to aspire to shape your awareness into that feel that it is delectably right. And that's what, in my way, I'm trying to draw toward by gathering myself in music through all my multiple mixes, my yoga, my art. And this is the second meaning of my title. Through music, the scattered stuff of my life takes shape, and what I'm living gathers into focus, distinctness, clarity. Through this music, through this alchemy, even the blue notes of my life may find their expression. Their dissonance can be clearly heard and sometimes even enjoyed within the fuller palette of the rich sounds life offers us all. When I speak of gathering myself in music, myself and music are not two distinct things to be brought together in this gathering like ham and eggs on a cafe plate. There's closeness to music and life, and the same connection that draws me deeper into music draws me more deeply into myself as well. But not just into myself as away from others, not at all, but toward horizons within me that somehow, in a way I still don't understand, opens me outward as well. Music can transport us. Music inspires us and heals us even. But the full experience of music, as I experience it, connects us with something in our own experience that isn't just our own. Something just as much a part of the experience others have in that same Beethoven, or that same hearing and singing of this little light of mine. They may not be the same person with the same ears. It may, in a literal experience sense, even be different music as differently heard. And yet, in that music, the composer, the performer, anyone who's in that space of deep receptivity to the fullness of what I find there is with me in that music. Where they go in their listening self and where I go in my listening self may be inflected by different harmonies and overtones. But in what sense, we are in the same musical place. The more of myself I gather, the more the different melodies and counter-melodies, the motifs of my experience seem to be played within the more enormous jam session of life. What strikes me more and more, the more I try to gather my true self, I feel I am, is how much I find my life to be like a note or a flow or a solo kind of riff of music. I'm not just a part of that interdependent web of existence. There is no me without the connections of that web. These connections are me, and I'm nothing but the weaving within that net that holds me together. I can't translate that to a musical metaphor really well. I think it would be a little forced if I did, but it'll come to me someday. Maybe it's the lost chord came to. Was it Gilbert or Sullivan? Sullivan. So, as Donovan sings in one of my favorites, everybody is a part of everything anyway. So to gather myself does collect the scattered parts of me, but the more I accomplish that collection, the more conscious and clearly focused that central awareness becomes. The less I find my definition in the narrower organ of individuality we call the ego. The more I find my note, the more composed and whole that includes me, the more I sound the depths within which I have my being. The more the note I am resounds with those broader harmonics. Maybe this is why as those gatherings occur, I don't find myself contained the way flowers are contained in a vase, in a space separated from outside by those walls. Quite the opposite. I become music soluble. Within that elemental host, the myriad walls and barriers in me just relax, grow lighter, and even dissolve until I become porous to what is outside me, not me, external. So more and more, as I gather myself to be a part in the way that a single voice is a part within a larger chorus, I need new images for this self that isn't just a separate ego. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung drew a distinction in the experiencing subject I find very helpful that parallels Dewey's distinction between experience and an-experience. Jung distinguished the ego, which we take to be the core of our personal selfhood generally, from a capital S sense of self. Something much harder to pin down, but also, if more mysterious, also truer of who we really are. Departing from Freud in his analytic practice, Jung found that the same patterns of energy too, but imagery, kept coming up in dreams and notebooks that have arisen in the myths and arts of all civilizations. He discovered that our dreams and fantasies draw on structures of meaning in our unconscious lives, which are not unique to us, but shared collectively through the whole global and historical gamut of human culture. This is the collective unconscious that Jung believed all conscious forms emerge from. And he used the term archetypes to name those essential tendencies to form certain symbols or patterns of meaning which we activate in our personal lives. For Jung, the archetype of archetypes, the form of all forms, what all of it draws toward as we go through our processes individually of what he calls individuation, is what he called the self, which we translate generally with a capital S, archetypal images of the self that I am in that way are indistinguishable from images of God, just in the way that mystics talk of an almost union with God, in which the two have not quite become one, but we can't make out the difference. Thus, my title offers a meaning still deeper, a third sense that opens in our reflection out of Yount. If the essential character of an experience unlocked for us the gathering accomplished in music, what I'm getting at is not just, here's a bunch of music, but something that binds it in a singular and distinctive way. Our Jungian journey yields the missing part. I gather myself in music, for my musings here to be faithful to that experience. I have to acknowledge that to gather myself brings me into that gathering that is no longer strictly mine. If I let myself follow far enough in that direction, I can't go where I want to go. I can't do what I want to do without realizing a connectedness with all of you, or at least some of you. Without reaching a point where all of those relationships and interdependencies define who I am. When I taught at Jacksonville University and found the students were willing to share their radio station with me, I was really quite thrilled. Man, I'm twirling potentiometers again. Until I found out that no one was listening. And that broke the spell, I'll tell you. The point of my offering was deprived of its point, because the whole point was for somebody to hear this cool stuff, right? I don't gather myself in music alone. My whole expression, my whole therapy of music first became possible as an offering. And that remains a central, if no longer essential aspect of that gathering. The tapes I made were always for someone. The mixes I make are for someone, even if it's for a later self of myself. So I reach out to the other within my own life as well. Reach across the moments of my life to future selves I have yet to engender. And I scrapped the endings that I had before to do a very different thing with you this morning. I want to share quite nakedly an experience that I had intensely yesterday, and that relates entirely to what I've just been sharing with you at a different level that's very powerful for me. So I feel at home here. I want to share this with you. So you can pull the hook, but wait about 5 minutes or so before you do. So I want to conclude by sharing how I was deeply touched, just yesterday by a musical message from a past Mark self. A couple of years ago, wanting to work the magic I spoke of last time, I made a self-hypnosis mix. Then recently, I found a magician to help me finish the trick. And so I included my hypnotized mix with what I shared with my psychologist by way of introduction. So the past 3 days, I've been in Pensacola, spending several months of therapy time, doing more than several years worth of therapeutic healing. That's interesting, isn't it? Including a distance reading by a psychic whose sensitivity is to the energies that I now am carrying with me. And that was part of what we did. I shared with you how my music gathering calls me to the deep, deep connections with others. But I found a complication in that. Speaking of a general seeing of me, what the psychic said, speaking particularly of my third chakra, that energy center in which I manifest and meet and come to the world as I'm coming to you today. She said, there's so much foreign energy there, I can't see you. And I had invited her to do some healing along with whatever reading she was doing. She said, I have to. because I have to clear that energy out of there in order to see you, in order to find you. So much foreign energy. So before when I'm speaking, it's like, well, there is no energy that's just mine. It's all like this relationship stuff. But what she was picking up on was that, yeah, there's some stuff that's more foreign than the rest of it. And she actually, as we proceeded through there, said, you know, there's so much of that that actually has become a kind of wound. And as I was discussing this with my magician, with my psychologist, he brought up that Jung had said that at a critical juncture, the harmful powers that we carry within us shift and become helpful. And that's like the most powerful, transformative moment of healing. And so, when he said that, I meant only to quote a line from an Indigo Girls song off this Hypnotized mix. That's what I meant to do, but if you've ever been in therapy, probably even seen bad movies on the Lifetime channel of what therapy's supposed to be like. Whenever people get all weepy and great stuff happens, that's therapeutic, right? So I meant just to quote the line from the song, but it turned out that I broke down crying, and we ended up going into that, going through all kinds of things. And then I went into a trance that was the deepest I've been into, and maybe for the first time, a trance in which my conscious self completely let go from my body and unconscious self to find what was true for me. So the line that I had mailed to myself in the bottle of that mixtape is from the Indigo Girls song, Everything in Its Time. And the line is, what was once your pain will be your home. Remember everything I've told you. Keep it in your heart like a stone. When the wind has blown things round and back again, what was once your pain will be your home. And I think they're speaking exactly to that transformation that Jung was speaking to. And this was exactly what I was seeking in my magic, in my self-hypnotizing music mix, in my reaching out to this new person as a psychologist with the Jungian background, the understanding of hypnosis and the other things. And so part of what came out of that for me is that I'm not there yet, but I have reached a point where I feel a different center of gravity. I feel like I can move forward with energies in a greater clarity as I'm expressing myself, as I'm coming to the world, as I'm with you this morning. I feel I can kind of just say what I just said without having to beat it all up with my analytic mind. I don't think that that undermines what I told you in my earlier prepared remarks. I don't think it undermines the value or the validity of the connections we have. But for me, what it means is there's a part of me that can choke that off. And the really great irony is that some of what chokes me off from being able to reach you is a part of me that's trying to guess what you might want and what might work for you, that keeps me from being able to just be myself and be with you in any way, right? And so that's just where I am, and I'll just end it by saying I'm delighted that you all have given me such a welcoming place to be able to share that with you. Thank you very much.